the final thing I'd like to talk about, and then perhaps we can get on to other issues. But the last thing I wanted to talk about is the reading of the bills. And that is, there are generally rules that require that bills mature for 3 days. That a bill, after it's printed, has to sit on your desk for a 3-day period before it can be considered by the House. There's an exception. There's an exception called the message of necessity. It has been used by governors left and right to really short-circuit the study and research process in the state legislature. What that allows is a bill, even though it hasn't been printed and been on the desk of a legislator for 3 days, it allows its immediate consideration. It's a process that's been abused. When I was in the legislature on the last day, we would do 50, 60, 70, 80, 100 bills, almost all of which would get messages of necessity. Because the leadership had put a majority of support together for a bill, they wanted it passed immediately so that legislators wouldn't have the time to read the bills. Those nice warm bills that I talked about that piled up on my desk, I was a lawyer. I was one of the few people who actually opened up the bills and started reading the bills to figure out what they were actually doing. And you would be amazed at how many times when you actually read the bill, it was slightly different, or in some cases completely different than what you were told about on the floor. The process of the immediate legislation of overcoming the 3-day rule is a bad idea. It's one that ought to be abandoned. It's one that the Brennan Center report has condemned. And I'll conclude on this note, and then we can open it up for discussion and questions. I have said to everybody in this race that if the Democrats take control of the majority of the New York State Senate, we will, within 60 days, change the rules of the Senate and adopt most, if not all, and I think there's a good reason to adopt all, the recommendations of the Brennan Commission report. It's time for that kind of change. And I would just suggest to you that there may be others who stand up here someday. I was hoping my opponent would come, because he's been in the Senate for 6 years. Not one, I believe there is one exception, Stu. There is one thing they did. They required you to sit in your seat to vote. That's the one change they made. I would suggest to you that over the course of the last 6 years, nothing has changed. They, for some reason, seem to be very happy with the notion, the Senate Republicans, that they run the most dysfunctional legislature in the United States, if not in the world. I would suggest to you we can no longer afford that in New York. I would suggest to you that we need fundamental change to open up the system, to make it better, to take the Brennan Commission report, implement it across the Senate, and once we change the rules, change the process, we'll change the substance as well, and we'll end up in a posture where the difficult problems of our era, taxation and spending and educational funding and health care for all, those issues will get a full debate in the New York State Senate, and there'll be an opportunity for the public to watch that debate and understand what we're doing with their tax dollars. I think it's critically important for the future of New York. I believe that unless we cure our dysfunction in our own house, in the New York State Senate, we're not going to be in a position where New York will have a better future. I would suggest to everyone, you may hear during the course of this campaign, my opponent and others say, oh, give us one more chance. If we get one more chance, we'll make some changes. We might do something differently. I would suggest to you, after 70 years of sitting in the majority in the New York State Senate, there's no more one more chance. There's no more opportunity. They don't deserve the opportunity to now suggest, oh, don't worry, we'll make changes. That's been a hollow promise for 60 years and nothing has happened. It's time for a change. If we want New York to progress and move forward, the only way we can do it is starting with changing the way the legislature works, and the only way to do that is to change the people who represent you.